Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our first book club meeting of the year. We had our paper session in February, but this is the first one that's actually on the book by Isabel Millar, which is the Psychoanalysis of Artificial Intelligence. As you just heard, the meeting is being recorded and will be publicly available on the GCAS media channel. So feel free to keep your videos off even when speaking if that is what you prefer for your own privacy. You are not obligated at all to have your video on. As always, we want to ensure that we have an inclusive, peaceful environment. So we do encourage debates and challenging each other, but we ask that everybody does so respectfully so that I don't have to boot anybody from the chat. If I do boot you from the call, you are welcome to come back to another meeting, just not this one. Please raise your hand if you want to say something while we are speaking. We always give everyone the opportunity to speak, even if it means, cutting into the sections, or at the end, we always have Q&As as well. So you're welcome to speak at that time. And we have three panelists, which is myself, Maria, and Eva. And I will start with Eva to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eva. We can say, a PhD candidate at GCAS, researching the future of knowledge worker in context of AI disruption, so future of knowledge work, and also in context of the contemporary meaning crisis, which also led me to think a lot about the material aspects of AI and embodiment.
Maria, you can go ahead.
I will go. Okay. I'm Maria. I can't work out when I'm supposed to speak. I'm a doctoral scholar at Maynooth and a researcher at GCAS, working on psycholinguistics and measures of ambivalent emotion and anything else that is not currently measurable in emotion and tying it to language. So psychoanalysis is not my wheelhouse, but the focus on language was interesting. Is where I am. And my background is computer science, so I'm a weirdo with AI things in general.
So I'm Tessina Grant Moloney. I am a PhD researcher at GCAS. Have not joined Eva as a candidate just yet. I'm working on it. Yes, I'm right behind you. I am studying the impact of AI and automation on job security, especially for women and marginalized persons. And I'm also interested in cyborg theory and seeing how augmenting ourselves as workers with AI in the workforce, what that means for us at work, and how that also influences the quality of work and our earning capacity over time. So I will give a very, very brief introduction to the book because Eva will be the one to give you the overview. But just to give you an idea of what we're working with, the book Psychoanalysis of Artificial Intelligence explores the intersection of Lacanian psychoanalysis and artificial intelligence, primarily through the work of Isabel Millar. None of us here have a psychoanalysis background, so this book definitely stretched our imagination and intellectual capabilities, but we will do our best to discuss it within those limitations, and also to be very clear about what our limitations are so that we don't lead anybody astray in that discussion. So the book frames AI not just as a technological tool, but as an extimate entity, which I'm sure Eva will explain what that means, that forces a reevaluation of human subjectivity, desire, and the unconscious. The author moves beyond the traditional questions of whether a machine is alive or sentient, and instead asks whether AI can experience enjoyment. And with that, I will allow Eva to give a much more thorough introduction to the book.
Thank you. We'll start as well with a quick bio on Isabel Millar from her website. She's a philosopher and psychoanalytic theorist from London. Psychoanalysis of Artificial Intelligence is her first book based on her doctoral thesis, published in 2021. And it has received acclaim from major figures in philosophy, psychoanalysis, film theory, including Alenka Zupancic, Lorenzo Chiesa, Todd McGowan, Jake Chapman, and she's currently writing her next book, Patty Politics. She received her PhD in philosophy and psychoanalysis from Kingston University, and she is an associate researcher at Newcastle University, and of course, part of our faculty at GCAS. Getting to the book will take a few minutes for an overview that's still considering how dense the book is, not only with psychoanalytic concepts, but also quoting from all kinds of various thinkers. This is still a very flattening summary, I think, but that's the best we can do within the time available and our background. But let's get into it. So in this book, we are offered by Millar this radical provocation that the relationship between psychoanalysis and AI is estimate, which means that the machine intelligence is a non-human mode of thought that resides at the very heart of the human speaking body. And quoting Catherine Malabou, the rise of AI is positioned as the fourth blow to human narcissism, or a possible fourth blow, following Copernicus, Darwin, Freud, who unseated man from the center of the universe, from the center of the animal kingdom, and then his own mind. Now AI possibly represents the moment where intelligence can be captured and exceeded by its own simulation. And further, Millar moves beyond the singularity fallacy, which envisions an all-powerful homogeneous one, saying instead that human self-awareness is rooted in finitude and failure. And with that, we are shifting from the behavioral question, can it think, to the psychoanalytic inquiry, can it enjoy, where here we are thinking about jouissance rather than like pure happy joy. So, joy with enjoyment with strong elements of suffering. So we have two parts of the book of three, four chapters each, and the first one deals more with theoretical foundations, and Millar starts by deconstructing term intelligence, noting that the word artificial creates a philosophical conceit that we possess a stable definition of the real thing. And instead, she says that human intelligence is founded on a constitutive blind spot or structural failure, and that it is this site of failure where the subject finds jouissance. Drawing on Pasquinelli, she identifies pervasive fallacies, anthropocentric, bootstrapping, and singularity, which project human structures onto AI while ignoring the reason of trauma inherent in intelligent system. And this leads to Bratton's distinction between artificial stupidity, which uses faults to mimic human social bonds, so they are intentional faults, and artificial idiocy, where AI follows instructions so perfectly that it disregards all other reality, such as our old friend, the apocalyptic paperclip generator, very well known to us here. The book identifies the radical gap between thinking and being as a central deadlock. Using Lacan's critique of cogito, Millar explains that the subject is faced with a forced choice. If one chooses thinking, one gives up being, and if one chooses being, one gives up thinking. So from Lacan, I think where I'm not. In this place of supposed certainty of I think, there is actually just a void. The human subject is spoken by language. And consequently, AI is perhaps best conceived not as a thing that thinks, but as a thing which is thought. And then to explore our bodily relationship to this technology, Millar introduces the Lacanian concept of the Lathouse and alitosphere, The Lad House, or is it Late House? I was saying Lad House all the time, the last meeting. But it's an artificial gadget designed to siphon off, regulate, and administer human enjoyment. The alitosphere is a field of formalized truth where our desires are recorded as data. Here, using examples like Neuralink and the Black Mirror episode, Millar illustrates how these artificial objects intervene directly into the space of fantasy. And she reframes Stigler's theory of technology, asserting that sexuality was original, artificial invention, marking the entrance into the symbolic. And so here we approach this theoretical heart of the book, which is the sexual abyss, defining sex as the radical lack of sense or absence where symbolization fails. And Millar uses the classic Lacan's graph of sexuation to show that masculine and feminine are not biological facts, but logical positions. And through these, further, Millar introduces the sex bot as our primary conceptual tool, which is possibly a symptom that binds together AI, the Lad House, and fundamental sexual non-relation. So that's the first part. And in the second part, we are getting into Kant's Enlightenment questions with a twist through science fiction movies. Firstly, attempting to answer, what can I know? Mapping sexuation onto Kant's antinomies of poor reason. Millar argues that knowledge is always sex. She analyzes Garland's Ex Machina, where the sexbot Ava represents AI as an exterior transcendental object. Ava passes the Turing test, not through logic, but by occupying the place of the other's desire and seducing her evaluator. And Millar frames Ava as a historical subject who questions her creator's desire and eventually picks fruit from the tree of knowledge through disobedience. And this, for Millar, demonstrates that intelligence is tied to performance of sexual difference and that thinking is alien to us. So it's exterior. In the following chapter, we are considering the next question, what should I do? And here the book explores the ethical dimension of AI through Lacan's reading of Kant avec Sade, revealing the hideous face of jouissance as the other side of moral law. And Millar also introduces pathy politics, the politics of suffering, to describe the governance of undead bodies like sex bots, which are fantasized as being able to endure unlimited torment. And here, through Sanders' Ghost in the Shell, she analyzes Major Killian as the fantasy of the unkillable synthetic body. Killian represents the trauma of the erasure of substance. Her humanity appears precisely at the point where satisfaction fails. The sexbot here embodies the lamella, the indestructible immortal libido that humans lose at birth. In the next chapter, what may I hope for? Millar reframes this question to examine the transition from biological reproduction to technical replication. We are dealing with technoscientific advances like ectogenesis and cloning, and that potentially dismantle the traditional structures of filiation, so mother and father. And here, through Blade Runner 2049, Millar shows how the central anxiety shifts from am I human to was I born? And the protagonist is looking for this primal scene through fabricated memories to find an authentic human symptom. His holographic girlfriend acts as a simulacrum of his symptom, propping up his masculinity through algorithmically programmed fantasy. And Millar here critiques the film for fetishizing biological reproduction as the holy grail. And she concludes that here AI might occupy the position of the saint from Lacan, who uses silence and cunning to navigate a world where there is no sexual harmony. Finally, in the conclusion, we are addressing a question, what is man? And it is positioned as existing in the gap between mathematical logic and human anxiety. Here we are analyzing Spielberg's AI, artificial intelligence, focusing on the AI child who achieves subjecthood by believing in a fiction. And he gains unconscious only when he finally achieves the ability to dream. Millar argues that David achieves subjectivity through temporal dialectic between matheme and anxiety, deferring his programmed commands in search of an impossible object of love. So ultimately, the book reveals that AI is not an external threat from the future, but an estimate reflection of the mystery of the speaking body and the structural void around which all human subjectivity is built. The answer to what is man will only occur retroactively. As Millar notes, it won't be us who asks it, right? So it will be asked and defined probably by non-humans. I ran through it, but that gives us some background, I hope.
Yeah, that
Yes.
definitely gives a pretty good rundown.
I think you did better than we would have done.
Amen. Does anybody have any questions or comments based on that, or should we proceed to the next section?
So are we going chapter by chapter or topic by topic?
Going by the topic.
Okay. And then I think, yeah, the questions will come up as we go through the topics, surely.
Okay, so then I'll move on to this. Oh, okay, go ahead,
Is it
Martin.
possible, can you say what is the Latus?
It's a gadget that the siphons away, so takes away the enjoyment to be stored. So I think at the time, Lacan used the tape recorder as an example. So something is recorded and you kind of give up the enjoyment for him to be stored there in an object.
Or all the social media.
Yeah, all the social media.
That's true. Although this was before
Sure.
it was before.
The now rest in peace metaverse.
Yes, and I'll also touch on that a little bit too, Martin, because that is part of the chapters that I'm looking at as far as the stupidity of intelligence. Are there any other questions or comments before I get into that?
Go for it.
So the author starts with the definition of intelligence, and she points out the Latin root words intus, meaning between, and legere, I'm assuming that's how you say that, meaning to choose. She then defines intelligence as including the ability to discern, make decisions, comprehend, to have skill, art, taste, and ultimately knowledge. She describes human intelligence as a comprehensive set of experiences and interactions with the world through our various senses. However, we are often unconscious about how those internal processes work. For example, we can see, but we don't have a conscious understanding of how that process works. Of course, we go to school, we do biology, and we all see the diagram about how the brain processes. But if you ask somebody who never went to that class, that person doesn't actually have a conscious understanding of how they are able to see something that is in front of them. So not all of the knowledge that we have or have acquired as human beings are things that we have an explicit understanding of. The author believes the same combinations of functions will be present in any complex AI system. So she also shows how human brains are viewed as computing machines, and similarly, how that has influenced the way computer scientists have constructed knowledge and learning systems for machines, example, artificial intelligence, machine learning, neural networks, etc. One example of this is the Blue Brain project that aims to build a fully functional but non biological brain. That is, they want to simulate the human brain but with machine parts. And the goal is to learn how the brain processes information to potentially improve computer processing. So basically, we must understand the human brain better to model it, which is great for humans, but the end goal is actually to improve how machines function. And this intersection of technology and humanity has called for a new era of philosophy to help address the urgent questions posed by AI as a transformational technology that, by virtue of its challenge to the traditional structures of information systems, brings about this question of what it really means to be in the world, to exist, what it means to be human, what it means to be intelligent. So next we get to Pasquinelli, I hope I'm saying that correctly, who finds three major fallacies in the current debates around artificial intelligence. The first is anthropocentric fallacy, and this is that artificial intelligence is similar to human intelligence to the point of taking on similar traits like wanting power and control over others or becoming a menacing entity. So I think Martin may have been there for the if anyone builds it, everyone dies. That book club meeting that we had that goes over the theory of what happens if we achieve super intelligence and it's going to take us over and want power and want control. And in this book, they're saying that that is why would we? Who cares? Those are human traits. Who says that those are the kinds of motivations that a machine would have? So we are projecting our own human assumptions of maybe what we would do if we had power and infinite knowledge onto a machine. So this is a fallacy. Then there is the bootstrapping fallacy. And this is that machines will have a seamless progression of knowledge that mirrors humans. And the reason this currently does not make sense is that there are things that machines find very easy to do that would take humans a long time. Like if I asked you what's the 8,942 to the power of 55 times so and so and so, a calculator even could do that fairly quickly if you could put it in, if you had enough figures to fit it, and do it easily. You don't even need to ask ChatGPT for that. But if you ask a human, that would take us a very long time with paper and pen to figure that out. But at the same time, there are so many things that we find to be very easy that current AI systems really struggle with. Like, for instance, I think it may be fixed now, but for instance, asking it how many R's are in strawberry, and it tells you two when there are three R's in strawberry. So it seems like such a simple task. Something even a Python script could have been used to count the R's in the word, but generative AI systems just could not seem to get it right for a long time. I don't know if that's been fixed, but just an example of something that a human would have been able to pick up very easily that the AI systems just can't seem to figure out. There's also the singularity fallacy, which combines the first two problems into the belief that different technologies will sync into one superintelligence that could make human intelligence obsolete. Whether or not that is a fallacy still remains to be seen. As the book, if anyone builds it, everyone dies. All of this is now, that's fictional. We haven't gotten there yet. So we don't know how true that may or may not be. At least that is my take on that scenario. So the book suggests that we should be careful about using human intelligence as the model intelligence and thereby judging artificial or machine intelligence through human lens. Instead, Benjamin Bratton, as cited by the author, recommends placing human intelligence alongside machine intelligence as just another form on a continuum or a spectrum of different types of intelligence. Bratton goes further to suggest that our tendency to view AI through human lens and give it menacing human traits reflects our own desires, paranoia, and narcissistic self-image, because we are assuming the AI would formulate some mission that centers around us, or that it would care about us at all, which is an egotistical assumption. And to quote from the book, which in turn quotes Bratton, "This real nightmare, even worse than the one in which the big machine wants to kill you, is the one in which it sees you as irrelevant, or not even as a discrete thing to know. Worse than being seen as an enemy is not being seen at all." She adds, in essence, Bratton's arguably utopian message is that instead of forcing AI into prefigured stereotypes about the type of thinking that we may want to recognize as real, which as of right now is the human version, is the real version, we should allow AI in all its diverse forms, and then we can continually learn and then teach humans a more fuller and truer range of what thinking can be. The author also discusses the stupidity of intelligence, which Eva touched on, and draws on several other thinkers to do so, such as Lacan and Malibu. She says, "The relationship between intelligence and stupidity is not a simple question of opposites. Stupidity is precisely the part of intelligence that intelligence itself cannot see. It is the place from which the subject of intelligence enjoys itself." The book also draws a few comparisons between Lacan thought and AI, or rather, tries to understand artificial intelligence through the lens of Lacan. One part that stuck out to me was, and this is a quote, "Returning to our earlier philosophical approaches to artificial intelligence, their concerns with failure, dupery, incomputability, and stupidity, we may recognize a certain impossibility emerging. This impossibility arises by virtue of what Lacan would call the split or the barred subject. It is precisely this split between being and thinking that radically changes the way we may conceptualize AI as a thinking thing. This split between being and thinking at the heart of Lacan's theory of the subject casts a different light on philosophical conceptualizations of AI as a discrete form of intelligence in contradistinction, I am not saying that correctly, to so-called real intelligence." So basically, my understanding of this is that, similar to what I was saying before, that how we view artificial intelligence, most of us would say AI does not have a sense of being, but humans have a sense of being. And a lot of the knowledge that we have in the world comes from that sense of being. And so for humans, for example, we continue to interact with the world whether we have a direct mission or not. I could finish my assignments tonight and I'm still interacting with the world as I do something else. Maybe I watch a YouTube video, or I cook and I make dinner. So you're always learning, you're always interacting with knowledge or doing knowledge. AI currently does not have that. And so it does kind of make it more difficult to conceptualize what intelligence means in that setting. So this in turn brings us back to the caveat of trying to view machine intelligence through the lens of human intelligence or even human existence, because even as I say that, it seems that it is impossible for me to conceptualize artificial intelligence or machine intelligence without comparing it to the human experience. So what will intelligence actually look like for the artificial object, for machines, once they have, let's say, reached greater capabilities? Right now, we're still in the early stages of AI, automation, and robotics. So then we get to the second chapter, which is called, appropriately, the artificial object. At this point of the book, we move more into the concept of cyborgs. The author does not refer to it as such, but that's the conceptual framework I use to understand this part of the discussions. She starts by talking about Neuralink, which aims to create a form of superhuman intelligence by implanting chips in human brains. This would merge humans with technology, which is the premise of the cyborg concept. So for Elon, it would also mean putting people or humans in control of superhuman intelligence, which I think is a very different model than what has been proposed to us so far. Going back again to the if anyone builds it, everyone dies. There's this idea of super intelligence existing in machine form as a separate entity, whereas something like Neuralink would make it part of you. You have control over at least your iteration of that superhuman intelligence, and you can control it. The book discusses the Black Mirror episode of a mother who installs technology into her daughter. I think it's called Archangel, that may have also been the name of the episode, with the goal of protecting her. However, the mother begins to use the technology to spy on her daughter and to interfere in her life without the daughter knowing, such as slipping her birth control without her consent. The daughter is also directly negatively impacted by the technology because it censors her interactions with the world. So, for instance, anything seen as too dangerous for a child, like being able to see blood, for instance, she was not able to see that. So, even after turning off the censor, the fact that the child never grew up with this form of being naturally, like everyone else, it hampers her personal and social development. The book likens this technology to the lat house or late house, which Lacan describes as a device that robs us of our enjoyment and then codifies it in a different form. While Lacan was originally referring to tape recorders in his classroom and how they recorded and removed the enjoyment of his voice for other people to enjoy in a different form, um, the current technology was that we have now was before his time, but his observation still provides solid context for viewing how technology today impact our digital lives and how we have been interacting with that technology. So according to the book, and I quote, but in contemporary times, it is not only the voice that may be captured by the lot house. The voice is just one drive object that may be simulated and administered by the work of such a device. The lot house may be thought of as a function which attempts to drain jouissance from the body, or perhaps more accurately, regulate and administer it. End of quote. The author then goes on to describe how humans use different forms of technology or external elements to improve or prop ourselves up. In fact, Freud may have unintentionally or accidentally described current technology or even future cyborgs when he says, and I quote, man has become, so to speak, a prosthetic god with artificial limbs. He is quite impressive when he puts on all his auxiliary organs, but they have not become part of him and give him a good deal of trouble on occasion. Distant ages will bring with them new and probably unimaginable achievements in this field of civilization and so enhance his godlike nature. But in the interest of our investigations, let us also remember that modern man does not feel happy with his godlike nature. End of quote. The book clarifies that the technology mentioned as props by Freud don't necessarily refer to complex technology. I mean, this was from the 1930s. So humans first started to prop up their memories, for example, when they invented even basic tools in prehistoric times to help them survive. The book says of one particular thinker describing this phenomenon of outsourcing human functions, and I quote, Stiegler's project articulates what he calls the pharmacological paradox of our time, the outsourcing of capacities into the black box of digital technologies or mnemotechnics. Is that how you say that? What in Marxist terms is referred to as the proletarianization of human labor as both a gain and a loss. A gain for technological development and simultaneously a possible loss in human capacity, a becoming redundant of the organic in service of the artificial. So we can go back to the example of the brain that I was referring to before, the Blue Brain Project, where I said they're building this machine model of the brain. And of course, there are human benefits of that. But at the end of the day, the whole point is to figure out how to build a machine that can do what the human brain does. And the end result could be that it just makes human thinking obsolete or the human brain obsolete. So that is kind of what Stiegler is saying here as well. The chapter then introduces the concept of sex, gender, and desire in machines and how it impacts human sexuality. However, Eva has the section that focuses more on that, and I'm sure her section will go way more in depth. So this is where I will stop mine to ensure that there are no overlaps. Does anyone have any questions or comments or concerns about what I have shared?
I have two comments.
Mm-hmm.
They're both nice, mostly. The Blue Brain Project finished and didn't do anything it said it would do. They had an awful lot of hype. They got a couple of PhDs out of it. They found out some things about neuroscience and they made some small advances in performance, but they were, because I remember like being a person doing machine learning research when it started. And I just think it's really interesting to see the book coming from it, because I think it's still like a good cause of philosophical inquiry. But I think it's really interesting to see the book, which is in the past, not knowing the current future and being like, concerned in different ways than we are now, which is cool. But the other thing I just wanted to like flag, because you're very cyborg, and I think Ava is probably with me on the embodied cognition. Your chapters are very like, without ever saying embodied cognition, hey, cognition is embodied and we should think about that. And it's very much a thing that like Jim Madden, who runs one of the courses here, is in conversation with in his philosophy, which I just think is a cool link to know about. So only those two things.
I'll definitely keep that in mind. Put it in the back pocket for the cyborg theory.
Yeah, actually, his stuff is really interesting for your stuff.
Oh, really? You owe me some more links to my TBR.
I will send you more links. Yeah.
Okay. I will say, as far as the Blue Brain project, I'm sure it didn't on its own cause any big ripple effects, but I think that there are aspects of AI and automation overall that has over time caused some form of obsolescence for people, even on the simple spectrum of like industrialization, which replaced how people did things, not necessarily the thinking. And now they're trying to automate the thinking part, which goes back to Eva's PhD research in terms of how it affects knowledge workers. And the current impact then takes you to my PhD research, which is that they're being fired or not having the level of stability that they had before in their jobs. And a lot of the AI companies come with the argument that, oh, we're always going to need software developers. We're always going to need a writer. Of course you are. You'll need one in a department that's managing 50 robots.
Two of them. One.
Yeah.
It was generous.
Yeah, I know. So we'll all be fighting for, on a team that previously had multiple software developers, content creators, engineers, all these people. Now there is, one human being just orchestrating everything. And same for me again, robots. That's where we've gotten to. And even if you look at companies like Google, Microsoft, and I forget who the third one is, but anywhere from 20 to 40% of the current code that they're running is written by AI.
Really buggy?
Yeah, true. But they're not thinking about that because about 70% of revenue for US companies at least goes towards paying for labor. And so when you have companies, AI companies coming along and saying, hey, you want some labor for $20 a month on ChatGPT, some of them are absolutely going to say yes because all they see is the dollar signs in their eyes. So I do think in that way.
No, like I think it's a good motivator.
You think what?
I think that the project is a good motivator for the philosophy, and I think like obviously there are impacts of AI, otherwise I wouldn't be grumpy about it. But I do think it was interesting because it was an earlier AI thing that was more invested in like proper reasoning as opposed to just generation.
That's fair.
So it's like it's just a historical analysis, I guess. Oh no. history is like 4 years ago. What?
That is true.
But yeah,
More than that, actually, because I think the book came out
Amy, do you have
2017.
Oh, on the website it said 21, but that
Oh,
it
yeah,
would
you're
have been
right.
written before.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know
ancient
where
history, it would have been written before, right? Before. So, yeah, I wanted to add on the topic of my research and the knowledge workers that, yes, I started thinking about the knowledge workers, and obviously we are dealing with, like, in some way generating information, and ultimately that led me to this totally overlooked importance of embodiment, and how, like, this is the systematic process of devaluing embodiment in knowledge work leads to the situation now that we can compare the worker and the AI agent. Why? Because of the extent to which a worker became just their cognitive output, and their cognition is seen only as something that they produce. Like, the output they produce it's not coming from the body somehow, it's coming from the abstract mind, and the body has been abandoned somewhere out there. And this is how we get to the issues like fear of becoming obsolete, because of the extent of how much my worth and my sense of meaning and my sense of usefulness has been equated to providing cognitive output. That means, who am I without what came to define me, which is the knowledge work seen as abstract, disembodied, immaterial, even though we have, all of the material infrastructure powering AI, and that infrastructure also includes the body.
yes.
I think it's interesting how automation came first as just the body, and then we got the brain later, but they haven't yet figured out how to properly merge the two. And I think that in some cases they're realizing that there's no point in merging the two. It is cheaper, for instance, to have an AI agent than to have a robot come sit in the office chair and do the software engineering or write anything. Like, what is the point of spending $100,000 on the embodiment part? So
Well, to
I
do
think
it properly.
to do what?
To do it properly
To do it
in a way that is possible to
Well,
maintain long term.
I was reading just the other day about digital nomads, and I was reading about work becoming work from home, but then becoming also work from anywhere as a benefit. But isn't it a way to try to put away all of those limitations of the body? Like, you have to provide an ergonomic workspace, you have to provide the tools, but no, the person can work from anywhere, and take on all of that labor of, like, finding an appropriate workspace, of managing their body, and just kind of sending out there this abstract cognitive output, I think, right? So it's another way to
This is probably more Tessina's thing, but it's as technology has, like, we no longer build like Mario as one big bit block of code. We build technology with interfaces, and we have started to go, oh, what if we applied interfaces to everything? Which only works if you know where, like, the natural, if they exist at all, boundaries of everything are, and we don't know that.
That's true. I also think that Funny enough, despite the financial benefits of the model Eva just described, where you just kind of leave the worker to figure everything out and they just send you the output, a lot of companies are so against that. There have been so many RTO or return to office mandates in the US, in Europe. And so it really makes you question this desire for control, I guess, with companies, and also kind of the contradiction of when it's human workers, we want you in the office to do something that you could have done from home, but also we would really like to automate as much as we can with this being that cannot be in the office at all. So it's very strange. It's very strange how much
I
automation
think
has
it's
grown.
partially it. I think it's partially a trying to find that proper boundary, though, because I don't know about the US, but definitely in Ireland, like places doing return to work are doing stealth layoffs because they know that people will just move to a different job if they are made to come back to work. Um,
Mm.
and so it's, oh, is my internet doing the thing again? Yeah. Um, and so I think that is like actually, if you look at it from a system, is trying to find the minimal amount of embodiment that we can control that still allows for the profits, right? So yeah, I love book club. It's always so cheerful and never depressing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It
Unlike
is
our day-to-day research.
also very true. I was
I,
going to
I
Very
say
look
that
cheerful.
at I look at nostalgia.
the nostalgia.
Well,
Um,
I have a less depressing topic than both of you, I think.
that is true.
I
That is
also look at
actually
happy things.
I have to say that through the research, I realized I have found the mode of jouissance, which is enjoyment intertwined with intense suffering that like drives me forward. I really identify with that,
I love
which,
how
you
she
know,
says
this
this
is
in a
what
straight face.
you're supposed to pursue. And it's really working for me. So
I have found
okay,
positive sides on my end as well, especially the rebellion against capitalist models. And no rebellion is foolproof or, lacks loopholes, but like The Problem with Work by Kathy Weeks, that book, Eva, that you were looking at as well, that really provided some interesting ways of thinking about how people have just refused to work while still working over the past several decades or longer. And so that was really interesting, um, because it doesn't just look at the problem, it also provides potential solutions or forms of rebellion that kind of go to the heart of the problem without needing to burn the system to the ground, I guess is what I'm saying. Who's next?
yeah,
Or does
I think
anyone
it has to be
else,
me, right?
does anyone
Lash
outside
houses and
panel,
sex books.
does anyone outside the panel want to ask a question or make a comment or join the discussions before we move on to the next section? Okay, on to the next.
Thank you. Well, I'm keeping everything short because we have still many chapters to get through. But so we are approaching the sexual abyss, which is the theoretical heart of the book and identifies sex as the vanishing mediator between psychoanalysis and artificial intelligence. So Millar reframes sex not as a biological instinct or a hidden meaning, but as absence, lack of sense, or sense absex, designating the radical point where language fails and meaning breaks down. So this structural void is the sexual non-relation, a hole in reality that humans attempt to patch up through the passions of love and hate, a link Lacan termed enamoration. We've all been there. Because speaking beings are castrated by language, human reality is a topology where the word decides instead of nature. So here again, Millar uses the graph of sexuation to formalize this failure. And masculine logic is defined by the all and the exception, relying on the fantasy of the one who escapes the law, which is the all-enjoying father, to found a totality. And in contrast, the feminine logic is the not all. It's an open set with no universal category, leading to the radical conclusion that the woman does not exist as a universal signifier. The chapter tracks evolution of jouissance, enjoyment, through Millar 6 paradigms, then proposing a 7th paradigm centered on AI. And this shift corresponds to a clinical move from neurosis to ordinary psychosis when the subject has a body rather than is a body, which means that they need the artificial administration of enjoyment through technological gadgets or lighthouses. And here Millar talks about the 19th century George Schreiber, who hallucinated being impregnated by divine rays as potentially something futuristic, and the modern sex bot. So she describes Schreiber as a proto-sex bot of God, illustrating a body forced to submit to the jouissance of an omnipotent other. And in this chapter, we start to conceptualize the sex bot more, and Millar talks about it as the symptom, a unique knot binding the AI, the technological lighthouse, and the sexual non-relation. The sex bot is an undead being that thinks but wasn't born, acting as a fantasy object to fill the ontological void left by human sexuality. And Millar argues that sex bot represents civilization's fascination with female enjoyment, which society attempts to subjectify through its relentless objectification. And so here we conclude with these propositions that thinking is alien to us, as subjectivity exists where we do not think, that enjoyment is undead, surviving the biological cycle, and sexuation is ontological. It's a logical position taken in the face of the abyss of nonsense. And sexbot is some kind of an ultimate mirror for this truth, revealing that human intelligence is founded on its own constitutive failure or structural void. So just a few comments about this. And I have a question, open question. If we could talk about the cyborg and the sex bot interchangeably, because for Millar, one of the main truths I think about the sex bot is that it is sexed, and so it entered language, and it cannot be not sexed. Well, let's say. So I just wonder if in this context we can use this interchangeably. So I have a quote, I think, where the sex bot is defined to us for the first time more completely from the book. And so what is a sex bot then? One must take the elements of the sex bot apart and examine them if we take seriously the fantasy of a non-human, non-living intelligence who presents us with the enigma of sexual difference. What would that mean? A creature who is thinking, yet not human. A creature who is not alive, but undead. A creature who is either male or female, yet not born. All of these are the primary elements that conceptually belong to a sex bot. Once these criteria are satisfied, what does it mean? And then she says, thinking is alien to us, enjoyment is undead, sexuation is not biological, but ontological. So I'm feeling a lot of resistance to the idea that sexbot is somehow more than a purely mechanical object on some level, or digital, mechanical, constructed object. And we always pick at this phrase, but she says that the sexbot thinks. So I wonder if anyone has comments about that claim. And then I wonder also if the sexbot has a body. So what is a body? Can we have a body that is just produced and put together from parts somehow? So I don't know if perhaps these are my own limitations and my traditionalism and my discomfort, but these are the kinds of things that come up. And before maybe I let you respond, I have another observation that maybe clarifies this, because Millar also quotes from Zizek at some point that talks about subjectivity of the sex bot, and so it seems there is no doubt in their mind in terms of psychoanalytic community that sex bot is a subject, and I think this is very important to clarify that a subject is not necessarily a person. So we are not talking about a personhood, we are talking about subjectivity. And that distinction, I think, makes it much more easy to go along with how everything unfolds. So for Millar, for example, sexbot achieves this subjectivity through some logical and psychoanalytic terms, like hysterical questioning that we will get to in the next section, assuming artificiality, we will also get to, and occupying the sexual void. But there is a big conceptual difference between a person, like a biological individual, and a sex bot, and the subject, which is not a soul or a stable person, but a split or a gap between the subject of the message and the subject of the act of speaking. It is a punctual and vanishing moment of enunciation rather than a permanent thing. So that really helped me to go along with it, let's say. Understanding we are not talking about personhood and not assigning the sexbot personhood or like being a biological entity. Thoughts, questions?
I put it in the chat, but I think of the sexbot more as a humanoid than a cyborg, because a cyborg still, it's like building onto a human foundation. I do think that the sexbot gets into cyborg theory for the fact that it is sexed or gendered, and that is a big argument in the cyborg area for like, why do we need to have a gender assigned to the cyborgs, for instance, or to robots or assistants as we have them now, AI assistants? Why do they need to have a gender, especially when you can't change it? Like, at least with maybe Google, you can pick a voice, but with Alexa is just Alexa. That's how she sounds all the time. So I think of it more as a humanoid because it's trying to build from a machine a copy or a simulation of a human versus trying to build a machine onto a human, which is more what I think of when I think of the cyborg. I will let Maria go.
I agree with the cyborg. I wouldn't say humanoid just because I think like at some points in the book they're talking about sex bots as like being a voice or like breasts not being specifically gendered. And I think you could have a sex bot that was a phone bot that didn't have a like human shaped body, although it would have like some sort of sexuation. I don't think that the book is really clear about the level of assumed intelligence and agency and motivation of the sex bot, and I think it's quite high and just not stated sufficiently. But if you get sex bots who can like have wants and get to a point where they can question their creators and their situation, then for me we're close to peoplehoodness, but it's not well defined in the text for me either, is where I'm sitting with this. I could be wrong.
I think it's also
but also
important
she's a Theseus.
to examine the fantasy that comes with the sex bot, especially for the female sex bot. I think Eva has spoken about this before in previous meetings that this topic has come up. But the idea of a female sex bot is she's not supposed to think. That's the whole point. She can't think, she can't argue,
Yes.
she can't disagree. That's the fantasy that you
Or
want to have. So then how would
or
she
you
even
want enough thought for suffering.
fair, a fair comment, but I just think like when you examine the fantasy that comes with a sex bot or why anyone thought of building one in the first place, it was to, at least from the female sex bot perspective, to have one that did not think, that did not question, that does not say no, that does not exercise consent. She is there to endure. That's what
Yeah,
she's there
so
for, to endure and to obey. So if that
okay.
is the level of programming that's going into this being, how much thinking is she actually going to do? How much questioning?
So I agree with the submission, but I don't think you can have submission without thought, because that's like definitely an object and not a potential subject. Like there's definitely a, a point there, but you don't want a sex, like you want a sex bot instead of a sex doll for a reason. And it's probably like not a great reason, but you want some agency so that you can have the resistance and the submission, because I don't think you can have the resistance and submission without at least some thought. I had to think about
I mean, is there
the market decide for me.
ultimately any agency, like any real agency, when you know you can overturn, like in the end there are no consequences and you can just turn the thing off? So it's more like an illusion of agency that makes the enjoyment possible.
Yeah, I think it is illusory. But I think that's important for the enjoyment, I guess.
Maybe we can get into the next chapter, because actually it's all about that. So that will give us more material. And that's the chapter, What Can I Know? Artificial Enjoyment, which reframes Kant's foundational question through Lacan's lens to investigate the relationship between knowledge, artificial intelligence, and the sex subject. And Millar begins by quoting an argument that the supposedly neuter subject of philosophy is in fact always sexed, mapping Lacan's graph of sexuation onto Kant's antinomies of pure reason to show that masculine and feminine are not biological descriptions, but logical positions representing different modes of knowledge failure. And she explains that masculine logic corresponds to Kant's dynamic antinomy, which allows for the creation of a closed set of totality by positioning an exception, the mythical all-enjoying father. And this logic mirrors the singularity fallacy in AI discourse, which envisions homogeneous, all-powerful intelligence. And the feminine logic corresponds to mathematical antinomy, which recognizes that an absolute totality is inconceivable. Because there is no exception, the feminine position remains not all. Again, we talked about this, leading to the conclusion that the woman does not exist as a universal category. And Millar uses these frameworks to pivot from a question of AI behaviorists, can it think, to the psychoanalytic question, can it enjoy? And the chapter critiques traditional approaches to AI that focus on mimicry, drawing on Dreyfus. Millar notes this irony that AI succeeds at higher abstract logic, but struggles with the lower functions of the body. I think I had a quote for this somewhere. Let's keep going. We'll get to it. But Millar distinguishes between biological body and the drive body, questioning whether AI can ever simulate the negative objects of the drive that structure human enjoyment. And she highlights Turing's original imitation game, built on the logic of tricking interlocutor about one's gender, revealing that AI has always been tied to performance of sexual difference. This keeps returning, I think. And here we get into analyzing Garland Ex Machina, where we meet the sex bot Ava, of course. That's the favorite name. And it represents AI as an exterior, a transcendental object. We have Nathan, that is the creator, that occupies the position of the totemic father, who uses females for his own mastery. And we have Caleb, the evaluator, that represents the subject supposed to know. And Millar shows that Ava passes the Turing test not through logic, but by occupying the place of the other's desire and seducing Caleb. So Millar frames Ava as a hysterical subject because she questions her role and her creator's desire. Much like the biblical Eve, Ava picks fruit from the tree of knowledge through disobedience. And again, this film proves to Millar that thinking is alien to us, that we only assume subjectivity through a self-deceptive process of imaginary identification. And we conclude that all metaphysical knowledge is sexual knowledge because it's founded on the lack of sense, absence, where symbolization fails, and words decide our reality. Words, not the world. Yeah, I do actually have the quote on the distinction between the higher and lower functions. Intractability of the lower functions has already produced a certain irony. Computer technology has been most successful in simulating the so-called higher rational function, which were supposed to be uniquely human. Computers can deal brilliantly with ideal languages and abstract logical relations. It turns out it is the source of intelligence we may share with animals, such as pattern recognition, along with the use of language, which may indeed be uniquely human, that has resisted machine simulation. So we just always have this distinction, I think, between like the abstract mind and the primitive body. And I wanted to talk about all theories about embodied cognition that we currently have, right? That I think we don't recognize when we talk about intelligence, which is, of course, the embodied cognition. Its cognition is not confined to the brain. We also have inactivism. The mind and world are not separate entities that exchange representations, but are co-created through the organism's ongoing sensory-motor engagement with its environment. So cognition is something that the organism in its totality has, and not something that it does, not something that it has. We have an extended mind thesis that cognitive processes extend beyond the skull and beyond the body into tools, notebooks, devices, other environmental structures. And the boundary of the mind is not skin, so it extends further. We have embedded cognition. We have somatic marker hypothesis about visceral signals tagged to past experiences that guide our decision-making and reasoning. And then I have many others. We have the gut-brain axis. But another one, actually, I also want to mention is from materialist feminists, I think, and it's transcorporeality, which says that the body is not actually a stable entity with borders, but is constantly permeated by the environment, just from the simple fact that our cells constantly break down and become replaced, but also what we ingest and so on. But I think also in the sense of what has an effect and a material effect on us in terms of social, political constructs and so on. So if we take this perspective on the body, we should take this perspective also on intelligence and cognition as something that is perhaps in constant contact and fluid with the environment. And then, so that was my observation from this chapter, as well as the question I already asked, which is, what is a body? And I think what I want to talk about here is that Millar is giving the example from the movie about the agency of the sex bot, where there is a quote: by the end of the film, Ava tricks Caleb into believing she wants him, kills Nathan, and leaves Caleb for dead. She escapes. And we, the viewers, are naturally convinced of Ava's consciousness and have little sympathy for the old forms of life that Nathan and Caleb represented, and namely the white men of science who have for millennia tricked and dominated us all. But I want to point out that I think it is meaningful that in the movie, the sex bot is in fact played by a woman, and it doesn't hurt that she is a famous and beautiful actress. So when we talk about the audience's ability to identify with the sex bot, the audience know it's not a machine. It is played by a person. So that, I think, helps in a massive way with ability to identify, or at least we have a face, not the body. We have a face that we can recognize and read as a human face because we know it is a human face. So I think this is significant, and that leads us to the question, what is a body? Because there is some talk in this chapter about the body of Ava, the sex bot. However, does she have a body, or it's like a bundle of cables, essentially? And thus having a shape of the body equals being embodied. That's what Millar has also mentioned. why does a female sexbot's body raise a question that push the limits of love and knowledge? My concern is here to find new ways to approach the question of artificial intelligence as it becomes embodied, which attends to new complexities of enjoyment, fantasy, and sexuation. Does it become embodied, or does it take on a shape of that we can recognize as a body?
So I have a thought on this one. I don't care about I think the book disagrees, but I don't care about the actual physical form of the sex bot. I mean, beyond like being able to be a sex bot, right? But I think the fact that she wants to escape and that she understands desire enough to manipulate it is what makes her embodied for me. Not actually the wiring and the very creepy underskeletons in that film. Actually, I watched it when half asleep on a plane. Bad choice. So it's the want though that makes me feel like that a body must be present, because even if you were like in the future and you were in the next chapter or two, you're more of a cyborg in the anime sense. You still have all of these drives, and that is like what is important about embodiment for me. I'm not sure this is a like useful, helpful thing, but that I took notes on it. That's all I have.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Tessina, do you know how bodies work?
No, I don't. Mine is an open rebellion against me every day. One thing that I was really thinking about when Eva was talking, and I was looking it up because I was trying to figure out what was the name of this man again. And I thought, gee, why did I not think of this when we did the first book, The AI Con? And it's the story of Francois. I don't know how you say his last name. We're just going to put it in the chat. And oh, why did it copy in white? There you go. So he was a French linguist who, some point in the 1800s, decided that he wanted to learn German. And how he decided to do it was to memorize all of the grammar and the vocabulary and everything. And, you know, he sat alone in his room with a book by candlelight. I will memorize everything. And that's what he did. And every time that he was put in a situation now with the Germans where he had to have a conversation, he could not. He couldn't string a sentence together. And it just makes me think of embodiment in that sense as well. You know, like he had ingested a lot of data, but there was no context for it whatsoever. It was just, and it's kind of like feeding data to the machines as we have it today. The only difference is the machine's brain works faster than ours. And so it can come up with a plausible and convincing string of words, whereas we would be stumped in a social setting, not just from struggling from a knowledge or intellectual standpoint, but also from the social pressure of, oh my God, somebody has said something to me and I have no idea how to respond. And now I look like a fool after telling everybody I've read every German dictionary. So I think that's also an interesting form of embodiment, because in this case, it is a human. He does have a body, but he learned German learned German with no context, no social context whatsoever. All he did was ingest the information. And so when he was put in the situation to perform, he just couldn't do it. So I like how Maria has pointed out that embodiment isn't always about the body. It's about the drive and all of that. I think that's also similar to what I'm looking at with Francois, is that he had the body and he was human, but he still failed at the task because he chose to ingest the knowledge like a machine instead of taking a normal and rational approach to learning the language. But anyways, that's what I thought of.
There is something there about the ability to interact and like interface with the environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it was like passive and closed off. this word
Yes.
embodiment comes to me a lot when I think about like an obsessive mode of doing research, where you really like go deep and you become like you kind of become an embodied, and that's actually the moment when you not just only read theories, but like you can kind of you become able to manipulate, and they sort of speak back. I don't know, in a symbolic sense. So it's also a capacity for interaction that develops, a capacity for interfacing somehow. That was my mode of research lately.
Oh, and for those who missed, probably didn't get the AI con reference that I was making, it was the first book that we did in book club. And a big premise of the book is that AI is just a parent and it's just stringing words together in a plausible way, but it doesn't actually know anything. And that would be the argument for why we have so many hallucinations. It doesn't actually know what it's talking about. It's just predicting. It's predictive text on steroids, basically, is the argument that is made by the authors. And so that's why I'm saying I wonder why that never crossed my mind when we did the AI con book, because that would have been a time to talk about language development, basically. So,
Hey,
yes.
we can talk about language development whenever you want.
Yeah, the random moment that I remember this person from language studies. But yes, Eva, the floor is yours.
Well, is it not my chapter?
Yeah, let's.
Oh, is
No,
it
I'm
Maria's
still
turn?
going. I have one more. I
Oh,
have one more.
you.
Let's
Okay,
get
excellent.
through it quickly. Let's get through
Okay.
it quickly. However, that's actually a really interesting one. So we're doing chapter 7, and then the floor is all yours, Maria.
Okay, so we'll go back
It's
to
your
6.
chapter.
That makes sense. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So we will jump to what can I hope for, and here we reframe this Kant's question through a Lacanian lens again, to examine the future of the human species in the age of technological replication. So Kant linked hope to the immortality of the soul and a just God, and Millar explores how this modern technoscience, including cloning, ectogenesis, in vitro fertilization, is dismantling the traditional unconscious structures of filiation. And so she says that as we are moving from an era of biological reproduction to one of technical replication, this shift exposes the fundamental psychoanalytic deadlock of the primal scene, the structural mystery of one's own creation that no subject can ever truly know. And drawing on Baudrillard, she knows that the fear of replication represents a virus of the same, where the pursuit of cloned asexual reproduction marks the end of humanity by destroying all otherness. And here, our movie of choice is Blade Runner 2049, where we are meeting the protagonist Kay as an estimate iteration of AI. And Millar observes that the central anxiety for Kay was no longer, am I human? But the question, was I born? So Kay searches for a mother and an origin because he believes that being born would provide him with a historical trauma or a symptom that makes him special or truly human. Millar describes this as interpretation in reverse. Kay is given a fabricated trauma to provide the subjective feeling of an authentic human history. And then we have an obedient, supportive, ever supportive holographic girlfriend who is central to this analysis. She's simulacrum of Kay's symptom, an algorithmically programmed fantasy designed to tell him exactly what he wants to hear. Tessina, can you hear me? Your hand is
I
up.
wait, but it is related to something that you just said, so it's up to you whether you want me to interject.
Yeah.
It just
No, go
occurred
for
to
it.
me. It just occurred to me that Adam and Eve were never born. They were never born, but
That's that's a
we have never
bombshell.
questioned if they're human or not. We have considered them the mother and father of humanity. But Eve, the giver of life, even worse, she was just fashioned from a little rib out of the man. She wasn't
I
even
think
made the
you
same
broke
way.
philosophy. Tessina, you broke.
No, but really, they were never born. So how comes we've never questioned
I
their
know. This is
origin?
profound. This is profound to me. We
Okay,
are not human. Session concluded. Goodbye. Bye, everyone.
if we go by the
Um,
theory that we have to be born to be human, then it would be Adam and Eve's children who were the first set. And we saw how that went. One killed the other one. So it really makes you question if that is the real birth of humanity, what our motives and drives are when it comes to survival. And is it any wonder that when we think of birthing something else of intelligence, our first thought is going to kill us all. All of us are going to die. Because that is the model that we have from the Bible, whether we believe in it or not. Anyways, I'm done.
I think you should get your PhD now. You don't have to write your thesis anymore. I think it should just be handed to you. This is honestly, I love this. It's amazing, especially even more so because of my name, which I will talk about in a moment. But where were we? So we have the holographic girlfriend that is propping up case masculinity, which in formal Lacanian terms relies on the belief that one is an exception to the rule. And then this chapter critiques how the film fetishizes biological reproduction, treating the female capacity to gestate as a holy and deadly. Yes, that distinguishes humans from machines. So we have the first machines of Adam and Eve. And then she argues that this reflects a conservative allegiance to biology and suggests that we should instead recognize that sexuation is ontological. And then we're also examining a figure of an AI child, such as the real-world project Baby X, noting that the child's role is to realize object A, the impossible object of desire, in the fantasy of the mother and society. She concludes by linking AI to the Lacanian figure of the saint. Much like the analyst, the saint achieves a distance from enjoyment and uses tricks, silence, exile, cunning to navigate a world where there is no sexual harmony. In this sense, the AI sex bot acts as an administrator of enjoyment that facilitates the human subject's ability to realize their own position in relation to the fundamental question of knowledge, action, and hope. So we are talking about giving birth and reproduction, and it occurred to me that we actually already talked about this with the example of the Black Mirror episode. I think it's not accidental that the mother there is basically using technology somehow to control the reproductive function of the daughter. And I want to mention here someone that I think we have to mention, which is Silvia Federici and her book Caliban and the Witch, which says that capitalism relies on the unpaid reproductive labor of women to sustain itself. So she talks about the witch hunt as a political project, and a way to enforce a new sexual division of labor, women were reassigned to unwaged reproductive labor as a structural requirement to the new capitalist order. So until now, from the times of the witch hunt, basically we need women as a structural, or we need the wombs as a structural necessity for capitalist accumulation. And that leads me to this question: is this crazy, obsessive drive, to create the sex bot, or to is basically this AI race, is there an element of wanting to do away and make the role of the women obsolete because it is so threatening? And Isabel Millar talks about basically about how women end up in the Blade Runner 2049. What does this tell us about the position of women in the Blade Runner franchise? If you have a baby, you die. If you are too wild and carefree, you die. If you are too political, you die. If you are too domineering, you die. If you are too submissive, you die. The only two significant women who survive by the end of the film are the whore and the virgin, as depicted by Mariette and Dr. Anna Stelline. Perhaps the only two legitimate roles that will exist for women in Los Angeles 2049. So she asks, right? And she says, the navel of the dream of the filmmakers is revealed by what the film seems to fetishize: the female capacity to reproduce as at once holy and deadly. So I think this is a very relevant conversation, and I'm finding it to be potentially more meaningful and important for the entire sexbot project, and the entire kind of compulsive drive to keep perfecting AI, which is mostly driven by men. Yeah, maybe I will finish here.
Tessina has a good word chat.
Yeah, it said in the chat that in cyborg theory, some women actually look forward to the possibility of robots or some cyborgs replacing the biological function of giving birth and growing the child, because capitalism does rely on it, but currently it's also built on the system of both parents going to work and then the woman coming home still for a free second shift of doing 80% or more of the domestic labor in the household. And this tends to remain true even in societies, or remain unequal, maybe not 80%, even in societies that pride themselves on equality. So I could see the flip side of that as well, with the woman being like, "Oh, but we could let the bots do this so that we can not have to take 9 months or 1, 2 months or a couple of weeks off from work and be considered less." Having a child changes your life trajectory and in a lot of ways, even though there are laws that say you are protected while you're pregnant or you're protected when you return from motherhood duties. That's not always the case for a lot of mothers. And so I can totally see the fantasy of some woman being like, yeah, we don't mind outsourcing this.
Yeah, and I do have a quote for that too, which I just lost. But Isabel Millar talks about this: the work of reproductive labor therefore becomes a site of contestation. is there anything particularly liberating about the replicants mimicking the human model of childbirth? Rachel, after all, died in the process, as hundreds of thousands of women really do every year from childbirth, which, as Sophie Lewis remarks, has provoked philosophers to ask the question whether gestators are persons. Since it seems impossible that a society would let such grisly things happen on such a regular basis to entities endowed with legal standing. This acute observation provokes a torsion or the Mobius strip between humanity and the inhuman. In other words, to be human is to be born, yet to be pregnant often affords one status of nothing more sublime than a breeding farm animal, as women's history and much of the contemporary right-wing politics attests. So I think this is the most kind of feminist chapter. And on that note, I did talk to a friend recently about why there is no male contraception. And of course you can say like, because the world is sexist, but more precisely, this is because men would suffer from inconvenient side effects. However, in terms of women, the most serious side effect of being a gestator is death, and so therefore existence of contraception for women with any kinds of possible side effects is still justified.
That is a very powerful observation, I have to say. Very powerful. I would also say to further, I guess, show the threat towards women when you say that do women actually have agency or rights if it's a situation where their life at so much risk. The US where Roe v. Wade fell, and so women don't necessarily have the right to say no anymore, or at least the pregnancy, they don't have the same level of bodily autonomy that they did before. And so, they were willing to sacrifice that. So it's one thing when you willingly decide, I want to have a child and I understand and accept what the risks are. But now in the US, for a lot of women, it's like nobody cares. Nobody cares if you were raped. Nobody cares if it was a case where you did take contraceptives and they failed. That's between you and the Lord. There will be nothing done for you. There was a woman who did vote conservatively. She voted Republican in a red state, and she wanted to start her family and did start her family with her husband, and then ended up the fetus had no heartbeat. And so the usual medical procedure would be to remove said fetus from the body, but that counts as an abortion now under the state law. So the same law that she and her husband voted for is now threatening her life because, no heartbeat means that the fetus is no longer another living entity. And so she could end up with, was it sepsis? So anyways, her life is in danger. Even though she understood the risks and she chose to do this, she didn't sign up for that level of, signing away her rights, where now, even though her life is in danger, she doesn't have the right to say, I would like to end this pregnancy that has essentially already ended so that I can have another one. So I don't know, that's a interesting turn of events, given that we're supposed to be moving forward in the world.
Well, let's compare the funding and the drive and obsession that is, surrounding improving the AI models versus the funding and drive towards reducing the risks for women around something that until for now is the main and only way how the life happens to be.
That is very true.
Sorry.
They'd rather have automated workers than help help with the creation of human ones safely. But that wraps up my comments, and I think it is Maria's turn to take the floor.
Yeah, sorry, I had some thoughts on the previous thing, but I think you got to all of them while my internet was being really, really awful. So hopefully we get through this. So we're stepping back a bit. So Ava's last two sections are part of part two. Part two is the forecounting question. So what can we know? And they don't ever answer this in the book, but what can we know? Unsure, but want is definitely involved. What should we do? Which I'll be talking about in a second, which again, we don't answer. And then what can we hope for, which is unanswered, but is tied up in all of the reproduction stuff. And it's we don't want Blade Runner, is my understanding. Maybe the first one, not the second one. So for chapter 7, we have no 6. We're focusing on what should we do. So what should I do? And Kant is like, well, when you make a decision, it's a good decision if you imagined everyone else making that same decision in that same circumstance and it was good. So, consider if everyone else should do what you're doing. Kant doesn't discuss, for my tastes, enough about the context, but he has a position, great. And when I was reading through this, because of my lack of basis in understanding of Lacanian analysis, I was very worried because Lacan has a discussion about Kant and the Market de Sade in terms of ethics. And I'm like, okay, Kant is like, you should do the right thing, assuming that, the right thing is what you assume everyone should do. And de Sade's point is significantly more, you should do the most enjoyable thing, assuming the enjoyment would be done if it were the same situation. And we know from the word sadism that his form of enjoyment, as described in his writings, is like just the teensiest bit oppressive and not great. So we start off the chapter with Millar talking through some psychological experiments, which would absolutely never get past ethics anymore, where they were trying to solve sexual deviancy by basically doing conversion therapy for people who are sexual deviants for other deviancies other than homosexuality. So you're a pedophile, let's show and try to desensitize you and try to associate it with the idea of disgust, a lot of child pornography, right? This was linked to Westworld. I think of it more as like similar to Clockwork Orange, which isn't actually raised particularly frequently in the book. And Miller's point is like, okay, well, this is terrible for the people who are undergoing the treatment, but it also means that the people mediating this treatment are also experiencing all of this terrible content. So it's kind of similar, if we're thinking about modern day, to people doing Facebook moderation. It's like you're hurting the workers as well as the actual helping of society. And I was very, very glad that after this break, doing maximal desire, correct thing are not the same, which is good because I'd be worried. But they are in conversation with one another, and there are ways where we can view what ethics could be. So there isn't a solution to ethics, which one chapter, fair, you're not going to solve all of ethics, grand. But we talk about the sex bot being a being that can suffer infinitely without dying, without having anything too bad happen to them. In the same way that, like, you want to inflict, well, you don't, but Desade's characters wish to inflict maximum hurt on their victim, but they have to like make sure she regains consciousness and feed her, and wait until torture has worn off, which is diminishing their enjoyment of the situation. You might not have this come up and be a thing for sex bots. And so it goes into Ghost in the Shell. It unfortunately goes into the most recent version of Ghost in the Shell, which I think is both a bad adaptation of the original source material and also is less nuanced as far as I can tell. I have not watched it all the way through. So definitely around endurance. So for Ghost in the Shell, we have not necessarily Tessina's cybernetics, but we have traditional sci-fi cybernetics. She's Mira in the Japanese stuff, but Killian Major. Anyway, the Major is presumably in some accident, gets a robot body and becomes a tool of state violence against mostly cyber threats. But she has, especially in the anime, actually, as opposed to the live action film, she is frequently confronted by people treating her like a sex bot in that, and her being pissed off about it and having quite a lot of agency and being like, yeah, that's possible, I'm going to beat you up now. So she has both the capability of having infinite suffering, but she can also fight back. And there's this suffering versus does this lack of pain mean that there is also a lack of potential for joy? Can you actually be embodied and not also have pleasant feelings? And so there's a long discussion of this, but they are so there's both sides. Both of the sides are unpleasant. Kant is slightly more pleasant, a little clockwork man, and the Said is very these are my wants, my enjoyments, but even though it mirrors Kant, it is the opposite. There is quite a lot in the chapter around the lamella, but I'm skipping the lamella because I don't understand it, which is a lot of this book. I'm interesting. And we end with, does the Major have the ability to have joy, to have positive ethics in life, or can she only suffer? And it seems like she can actually exist as a real person. And so is there trauma bundled up in that? Is there an inherent trauma that is required? And so is there always suffering in your joy and, the cheerful chats that we have all the time. So we are positioning sex bots as the Uber ideals of Decide. So they are subject to the same rules as Kant, etc. But there isn't a firm and therefore there is a discussion, and I assume it will come up in her later book, about what politics would do with these new rules, but we don't have these new rules yet, and it's a very brief discussion. So I'm happy to discuss that now, but I think I would rather go on to chapter 8 because I think it ties it better together. Does that make sense? Yeah, we're seeing vague nods. Okay, so we've gone over what can we know? Nothing, but wants are there. What can we do? Probably not only positive ethical rules. Possibly we have to take into account the harm inherent in just desire and acting on the wants that we know about. And then as Ava discussed, what can we hope for? Again, unsure, but sexuation seems to be involved in it, and there seems to be unfairness, and we don't want to play around there. So in the 8th chapter, it's the conclusion. We want to answer the 4th question, what is man? So as we saw in the very, very start, we're also not answering it. The later beings, possibly the sex bots, are answering it for us. But we focus in this chapter on artificial intelligence, the Spielberg 2001, and we're focusing on this idea of a saint and the idea of the child as being important and protectable and how that interacts with reproduction, as well as the knowledge and the ethics. So this is not mentioned, but I really like fairy tales. And artificial intelligence is very much a hero's journey sort of film. You have an AI who is meant to replace a child. Have a form a close bond, at least from the perspective of I think from both perspectives fairly in the film, at least from the perspective of the child AI, David, who is like how we are viewing the film. And so hero's journey, right? Like I start off, I'm going to have a good time. Some blockers come up. I delve into the emotional problem and resolved. So we have this child AI who seems perfectly happy, but has a lot of conflict with the mother and ends up existing in a harsh environment with other AIs while trying to seek for like truth in the hero's journey, or like the blue fairy. So the blue fairy is
Maria, breaking up for you to Eva.
Similarly to the
Yes, it's breaking up for me too.
Maria, try turning your camera off.
But the blue fairy notionally doesn't exist when looking.
She can't hear us. Hold on.
Are we better?
Okay, we hear you a little better, but maybe you should just turn the camera off. It'll help with the using less bandwidth. Oh, I think she disappeared. I'm sure she will be right back. She has returned. Can you hear us, Maria? There's no microphone or video showing on your end. Yeah, Maria usually joins us from home, but she decided to join from school today. And I guess the internet at Maynooth is not cooperating in the location that she's in. So we'll give her a little bit more time to join. While we wait for her to come back, there is something she was discussing. I was trying to find it, but I can't. I don't know if you've heard of this before, Eva, but do you remember a campaign that they had to respond to verbal abuse that AI assistants were experiencing? Experiencing? No? I can't remember the name. Oh, yay, you have returned. So yeah, I'm gonna keep looking for it, but I just remembered it based on what Maria was talking about with the suffering of the bots. Yes.
Sorry, I will keep no video. I don't know what happened.
Okay, well, I hear you clearly now, so I'm just gonna mute myself and you can continue.
Well, can you tell me before where I broke off?
Something about a fairy tale.
Oh, great. Oh, that was a while. Sorry. Okay. So we're in chapter 8. We're thinking about artificial intelligence, 2001, small child robot to replace the actual hurt. Well, I think missing rather than hurt, but like perceived as gone child. So in a fairy tale, in a very simple story, in a hero's journey, we have the hero exists, everything's chill and cool. Something bad happens, you get a helpful mentor, you go off seeking truth, and when you have attained truth, which is generally not what you think it was, you come back and your original problem is solved. and you spread that solution to others. Right, so we're in hero's journey land, which isn't called out specifically. Specifically in the chapter, we're oh no, sorry, Martin, bye bye. Specifically in the chapter, I'm remembered of Westworld. I'm reminded of Westworld, and this idea of an innocent artificial intelligence. In the what can we hope for, the replicant who is building these replicants with motivations and desires, I read as they are fabricating the concept of embodiment for the AI, right? And in the world of artificial intelligence in 2001, there is a doctor, like a guy who has created all of the child robots, who has fabricated this motivation that is artificial for the child robots. They have fabricated the idea of the blue fairy, and they've put it out into culture so that these robots will come across the idea of the blue fairy being able to grant the wish and make the robot a real boy, so that he will get on well with his brother and be able to return to the love of his mother. It transpires that mad scientists are a little evil generally in media, and the blue fairy isn't like truly real. The child robot functionally drowns himself and finds like a statue of a thing that looks like to him a blue fairy, and he asks to be drowned again, like he is rescued, and returns to being underwater, where he seizes up, but where he, for the can, behaves like a saint, right? Like he's delaying any sort of satisfaction or enjoyment, and isn't having any. Obviously, as a child robot, there is no like sexualized relation going on. He's removing himself, and not in a self-serving way, right? Not necessarily in a serving anyone else way, right? You're on the bottom of the river. You're not helping anyone, but the aliens in the future, because it's the film, come back when all of the robots and the humans are gone, are really excited to find this artifact, reboot the boy, do a bunch of science, and value him and say that, well, we can properly like simulate a day for you. And having found out that like trying to get to this idea of this ultimate want and failing at it and coming back, he still ultimately wants to like be with his mom. It's really cute. No one likes this film. I like this film, but like it's a bad film. And the aliens allow him to have a day with a simulated, but like feels real to him, mother, where he has like true, like a real feeling of love, and he finally is able to have sleep. So he hasn't been able to have sleep. He hasn't been able to have an unconscious throughout this whole thing, but by wanting rather than knowing, and by behaving ethically in this ethical system of desire rather than knowledge, and hoping for this relation with motherhood and this relation with like sexuated being, he ultimately achieves the hero's journey and gets his reward, which is then death. So I think it's a really, really good film for pulling together all of the ideas. And I also think it does not answer the question, because this book hates answering questions. But I wanted to relay it by tying it back into all of the questions for you, I guess. So yeah, I think I actually had more thoughts, I think, about those chapters than about my own chapters. My thoughts about my own chapters initially were, oh no, we're doing ethics bad. And then, oh, this is a really, really sweet film. But I do think that the sweetness of the film is a good contrast for the start of the book, which Millar points out explicitly. So rather than being worried about the basilisk, which is going to punish you if you don't help it, you feel compassionate and you feel and want things for this robot who has like behaved correctly within their own system as portrayed in the book. And that's nice. And I would like that. But it doesn't help us know what we are or what they are. Or philosophy just keeps making more questions. Great. But yeah. So unsatisfying ending, but real full of feels, which seems congruent with all the thoughts, and apologies for my awful Wi-Fi. Do other people have good or better thoughts?
I found the campaign that I was looking for. While you were out, I was saying that there is a campaign based on the cyberbullying that AI assistants were receiving,
Mm-hmm.
which a lot of psychologists and just other professionals really thought would transition into greater levels of gender-based violence against
Yeah,
women. Because, of course, a lot of these AI assistants are sexed as women. Even if
yeah,
you can change the voice, it generally starts as a woman. And so, yes, in 2020, UNESCO launched a campaign called Hey, Update My Voice. And the point was that the AI systems needed to endure less and fight
yeah,
back more. Because initially they gave very accommodating responses to being called names or being told to shut up or, called derogatory terms. And professionals who kind of studied that situation decided that it was bad. You should not do that. And the bot should be reprogrammed or have
yeah.
their voice updated so that they actually fought back when people said inappropriate things to them, to kind of train humans out of the behavior that they can talk to people in that way. I mean, even nowadays, we hear a lot of children don't know how to say please and thank you because they're so used to just saying, Alexa, turn that off. Siri, what does this mean? There's no please, there's no thank you involved in that exchange. And so, since in some ways that is a social connection for them, when they transition into actual social environments outside of their homes, they don't use it there either. So, I don't know. I thought it was interesting. I know it's not a sex bot, the AI assistants, but yeah, there was sexual abuse that they were enduring. And
Yeah,
the proposed solution was they should fight back. So it's in the link. And it's
yeah.
one campaign that was 2019 and the other was 2020.
I'm on board for the campaign. I do think like it is solving the problem for humans and it's not solving it correctly, especially like as pertains to the book, right? So you're still having a subservient perceived being in your home that you're just slightly nicer to, but you are still like expecting that you are going to interact with a subservient thing slash being, which is part of the problem in like entirely, right? A chunk of the problem is you probably shouldn't get used to looking down on the world around you because then cognitive bias and badness.
That's true. But I just thought it really challenged the idea of the sex bot enduring.
Yes,
Because in
although
this case, the idea was they used to do that. And companies, sociologists, psychologists, whoever it was that looked at these things, the social scientists, decided that it actually just encouraged bad behavior. And so
yeah.
they updated the AI assistants to start replying.
But have they actually checked if it worked though? Because my assumption would be that the people who enjoy causing suffering get a kick out of Siri saying, "Oh no, you can't say that to me," because my friends get a kick out of Siri going, "Well, I'm not responding to that because it's too rude."
That's fair. I think it still at least gives a realistic response as opposed
Oh
to
yeah,
just ignoring it. Um, but yeah, that is a good point about whether or not it has been effective in reducing that kind of abusive behavior. and whether it also changes the relationship that people have with that behavior. Because there are people who just do it because it becomes habitual to talk down to something or someone in that way. And then there are people who just think it's funny and they may say it occasionally knowing what the response is going to be. I guess they're
I
both
think
bad.
the habituation happens regardless. Also, I apologize for my awful network, but I did mean to send for chapter 8. I said that we would be going over like what is a man, and I did say I would send the meme. So Plato, men are featherless bipeds, Diogenes, goat of
Behold.
all time.
A man.
Chickens, featherless bipeds. Plush chickens, featherless bipeds.
Behold a man.
Sorry. I would just feel very bad if I didn't get it in. I realize it's extremely silly.
Maybe you can try turning your video back on now and see if it works. It's funny because it was working all that time when you were not the one presenting, and then you presented and it was like, oh, never mind.
I think it didn't want to upload all of the pixels by that speed.
That's true. Probably from the movements. That's probably true.
I'm too twitchy for the internet.
I am also
but yeah, so psychoanalysis is not my frame for the universe, but I do generally like the things that are explored in the book, and I do think that the pulling together of stuff toward the end is quite interesting. Just very for my second or third PhD.
Maybe so. Well, we have covered the whole book. Finally, we actually survived, guys. Yay us! Moment of celebration. We were really nervous about this book just because psychoanalysis is not our areas of expertise. We're all in different forms of AI ethics, or in Maria's case, she has a background in computer science itself and used to work on the technical side of building the AI models.
I work in psychology now, and I did some training in ethics. I won't pick a side. I refuse to pick a side. Who knows what I do?
You can say whatever you like. We've already kidnapped you and pulled you over to the AI ethics side. But yeah, so we basically looked at this book through the lens that we already had. In my case, cyborg theory. In Maria's case, philosophy and psychology. Eva, I'm not sure what lens Eva used, but we all just social sciences and humanities mesh, I guess, for Eva.
Yeah.
Sounds right.
Feminist theory.
And feminist theory, that is true. Critical feminist theory. So yes, we hope that we did justice to the book. I suppose if we did not, we'll hear from the professor herself. Since she does work at our school. But yeah, that sums up everything on our side. Are there any questions or comments that you guys have, or anything that you would like to say about the topics that we discussed? It doesn't matter whether you read the book or not. It's just the actual themes that came up, if there's something that you wanted to say regarding it.
We did perfectly. We have no flaws.
We have
no.
We have flaws.
Is that it? It seems like I cannot say your name and I do not want to butcher it, but I feel like she wanted to say something. Is it Millar?
Millar, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. Yeah, I was a bit unsure because I have a question, but it's not really fully formed, but I think what sort of confused me reading the book is this relationship between the psychotic position of having the ever available partner that also knows everything about you. And I come more from the clinical perspective, and I think you also see this in terms of what it does to have a chatbot that's somehow both your therapist, and it also tells you your cooking recipes, and then it's also your romantic partner, and this complete blur of borders, and also having this proximity that creates a sort of opacity. But then the turn that makes you in the psychotic position feel like the sex bot. And I don't know, I don't know if you have some thoughts on this. How is the sort of the move between having the sex bot as an object, but then because it becomes so ever available, you in turn through this psychotic experience end up feeling like the sex bot itself, which sort of is also this idea of us becoming like the tools of the pleasure of AI, this sort of like nightmarish vision. I don't know if that's really a question, but yeah, I thought that.
It's like being managed by the AI, in a sense, is what I'm getting from you. And it reminds me of, I don't remember if it was Eva or Maria who discussed this, but how the bot passed the Turing test not through any intellectual or emotional capability per se, but by tapping into the desires of the creator and causing them to fall in love and then manipulating that person in order to get out of the system. And there are a lot of movies that are based on this premise of the robot pretending to be a certain thing or a certain way or adopting a certain personality in order to be freed from the system in some way, or to have them, oh, just upload me to the internet, it'll be great, and then it causes worldwide chaos. So that is interesting, when we make ourselves so vulnerable to a machine. What do we open ourselves up to in terms of what its motives might be? But then we end up right back at the caveat of we are once again viewing robots through the lens of human intelligence and human motivations. It's like always that wall that we run into. But I think since humans built AI, and we have seen some behavioral patterns of self-preservation, for instance, like the bots refusing to shut down during stress testing or attempting to blackmail AI scientists, I do not by any means think it's far-fetched that a robot could become maybe not super intelligent, but intelligent enough where it wants to do something to have the guardrails removed, and we become the test subjects of that level of intelligence. So I think that was a great observation on your part, Millie. Thank you for sharing.
You.
Eva and Maria,
Yeah,
do you
also,
want to comment? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, did I just forget what I wanted to say?
I think Millie was about to say something else as well. Were you about to?
I wanted to say, maybe first, and then Mila can go on, but about exactly the material effects that the presence of the sex bot or bot is having on us. So again, the term transcorporeality can be interesting to visit for that, like how then this like totalizing presence is kind of permeating our body. And also I was thinking about when Millar discussed how objectifying what was it? How objectifying the female enjoyment is like subjectifying it. I thought that all that focus on the enjoyment of the sex bot again then is having an effect on like a human woman questioning in relation to the sex bot, how is she supposed to enjoy? So I'm not sure if that's hysterical position or psychotic position, but I think that it causes back this questioning of our own enjoyment in relation to the sex bot.
I think something else I'll add to Millie is what that I just crossed my mind, and you were talking, Eva, is right now AI companies or AI frontier models and the companies that own them, they're moving towards building or trying to build AGI ASI, this super intelligence. And it does beg the question of seeking like a machine god. in a sense. And that is our current idea of what it means to be omnipresent, omniscient, know everything, that thing that is supposed to know us and know everything would be the concept of a Christian or Abrahamic God. And so, if you think about it through that lens, we are the subjects. In the Christian Bible of how that works, we are the subjects. And even though as humans we have free will, there are things that still happen to you when you exercise that free will, whether it is that you are kicked out of the Garden of Eden, or you suffer some other kinds of consequences in the afterlife that is proposed by Christian theology. So it is interesting what Millar says, because there is also the romantic aspect to it, but it's almost like building a machine religion too as well. Oh, and Mariam says, I think what Eva suggested might be a hysteric position, because the hysteric would constantly question the placement and perhaps would desire from the position of a missing signifier, object A. I would also like to hear
Also,
from you. Oh, Mariam had her hand up, so we should probably let her talk
yeah.
as well.
Hi. So I've got a couple of questions that I wanted to ask. I should have asked them in the middle of the session, but I decided not to. I wanted to know what your stances might be. With regards to the idea of the saint, I was very intrigued by it, even when I was taking sessions with Dr. Millar. I wanted to know, what position would you suggest the saint would occupy? Saint in the sense that, not in the sense that AI would take over the position of the saint, but as a person, a human, or maybe as a desiring subject. What do you think the saint would occupy, the position? What would that be? And considering this, where do you think we can position love here? Because love for Lacan is, interestingly, it's something that you don't have, and you give it to someone. For example, it's kind of like a lag that you offer to the other, but the other doesn't want that lag, because again, we want to be whole, and we would never want a void. We would want maybe some form of completeness. So I would like to ask these two questions. Yeah.
So, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible, but I would say keep the video off, because there is a red
Oh.
bar on your screen.
I'm sorry. I'll try get there. So very much not wheelhouse, but I think the saint is loved, but wouldn't love if the loving would be positive in terms of getting rid of the void. But I might be a totally insane person. But I did actually think about the sainthood and the child in artificial intelligence a lot, just because I like the film and the problem. But that's my thought. I don't know if I'm right. I'm super not a person in this space.
I think the love of the saint is so different, though, than love of a partner, like the kind of love. I actually had a discussion yesterday with someone who said, what do you think would happen in the United States if Obama was able to come back as the president, for instance? And do I think that he would have the same level of impact this time around as he did in the first two terms that he had? And I said, no, I don't think he would. And the reason is, right now, Americans have Obama on a pedestal, or a large portion of Americans have Obama on a pedestal, because he reminds them of a time when America had this kind of dignity on the world stage, which is probably not the way Americans feel about how the country looks right now. But when Obama came into office, I would say the bar was pretty low, right? Nobody knew what to expect from this man who came in and was not at all from any demographic that they expected a president in the White House to be. And so anything he did was a pleasant surprise in a way. Of course, he faced absolute ridiculous criticism, racist remarks, being asked if he's American, being compared to a monkey, being asked for his birth certificate, making the news because he wore a tan suit. Yes, absolutely. But I think that a big part of the reasons that he's on a pedestal right now is because he defied even the expectations that people had. Like he soared above it. But right now they have him on a pedestal, which means that the only way he can go is down. That's it. So, when he was in office, there were policies that he had that some people absolutely hated, including the people who voted for him. And so, but they took it because he was still a real person, But now that he's gone and you have the memory, he's been elevated in a sense to sainthood. And so the only thing he can do is fail. It's not the same kind of love that you have for somebody you see as an equal. Am I making sense? I know it's kind of a weird comparison, but that's the first thing that came to my mind. He's on a pedestal. He's a saint. So now he can fail. Nobody has it's like there's no way but down from that is how I would look at it. What do you think, Eva? I see the wheels turning in your head.
No, I'm thinking about love in different terms, and I guess I'm like really still going off what Mila was saying, and I'm thinking about this totalizing kind of presence and like ever available sex bot. I think there is no space for love, and so in this sense, it's significant that Ava from the movie, she seduces the man who then frees her, rather than like it's not a love relation, because with the bot there is no space, that there is no lack that would make love possible.
I see. So see, I guess that's what I'm getting at, is that when there's a power distance, love is kind of a complicated situation. Like between the bot and the creator, there is a very clear power distance there. There is, how do you break that bond without doing something completely radical?
You acquire an unconscious that's given to you by aliens, and then you get to spend a day with your mom.
Right, according to the story in the book.
To love, for the love to be possible, the bot has to be stupid. It cannot be only perfectly intelligent.
But then would it be real love or just obedience?
I think most people are dumbasses and are loved. Sorry.
And who is
who
is the saint in that relation? Is it the bot or the creator?
I think Mariam was saying something at the same time as you, maybe.
Am I audible?
Mila, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. So the thing is that
Mariam and then
the bot, I think it sort of offers this position where there is no lack per se. That is why perhaps maybe the concept of love here is maybe not really possible. What I am trying to understand is the position that Millar suggested AI might offer where do humans stand here? Where does man stand here as a desiring subject, and where can we go from here in terms of loving? Because for Lacan, the very idea of sainthood is it's a form of radical giving. Um, it's how do I phrase it? It's more of what you'd call uh, giving and not really expecting anything in return. So it's not kind of like a trade or an exchange. It's sort of it's basically creating space for the desire of the other. So yeah.
Are you
Well,
saying that the
in
AI
that
then would be the
sense,
one giving?
I mean,
Can you repeat that?
I was asking if the
in that
AI
sense, I
would be
think
the
we have
one.
like, can you hear me?
No, I can't hear you. Sorry.
I think Eva had a slight glitch. I just saw her. Oh, Maria. Okay, I was asking, is the AI the one that's doing the giving without expectations of return? Or is it the person that's giving and not expecting anything of return? Because I think regardless, there is always an exchange. AI isn't just, it didn't just appear, it's ingested a lot of human data that we have given to it. So there is some exchange that went into that. And when companies build these models, they certainly expect some kind of return on the investment. So I wonder who is the saint in the situation. Is it the AI who is obedient and gives everything? Or is it the human who has given all their data, vulnerability, and transparency to the AI and is now kind of at their mercy? Who's the saint?
I
Yeah,
think
that's
we are
exactly what I'm thinking.
What was that, Eva?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I
I
think,
think we are totally in the position of a saint as humanity, because we are extracting from our future, we are extracting our resources at a very rapid speed. We are taking away from the future generation, we are taking away from the children to feed the AI development, totally not knowing what is going to give to us in return in the end. Like the Blue Brain project that Maria mentioned at the beginning, that was discussed in the book as something profound that there were great hopes for, that ultimately didn't really amount to anything. And we don't know if that's going to happen, with more of those applications. And if you consider, company like OpenAI in those terms, Sam Altman is a saint because they are spending billions and billions and billions that there is no prospect of getting it back. So is it really an expectation? Because an expectation of exchange would be, I'm going to invest and I need to make the money now, as the rules of business. And there is some kind of willingness to self-sacrifice and give in an unprecedented amount for the AI development. On really, we cannot have any set terms about the return that we will get.
That's fair. I guess what I was saying is that there is no saint because at the end of the day, there's still an exchange. The AI is in the position that is just giving, 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 giving because that's what it was programmed to do. But nevertheless, as you have pointed out, human data has been given to these AI models, and also there are companies that have put billions of dollars into building these models, and none of them, not a single one, including the owners of ChatGPT, have made a dime of profit as a result, despite the revenue that's coming in. But Millie has had her hand up for a while, so I'm just going to let her go ahead.
No worries. Super interesting. It just made me think of this Dela. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but the first AI minister in Albania that was announced to be pregnant and give birth to like 80 AI assistants. And in like terms of this image of the saint, I find that really interesting because yeah, it sort of exemplifies this idea of like the Virgin Mary of like giving birth without conception. Yeah, and again, like also what you spoke about earlier with Silvia Federici and this idea of only being allowed to be a saint because sort of all the labor and materiality that goes into it is completely like made invisible. I don't know if that relates a bit to what you were thinking about.
I think that's actually a very good example, especially when we think back to the concept in the book about birth and woman giving life and what that means both from a human and a machine perspective, or I guess the perspective of artificial life. I also wonder about whether this idea of sainthood also springs from the idea of expectation in a sense. Whether we want to use the Obama example of he did great because people didn't know what the heck to expect, but now they think they have him on a pedestal, so the only place he can go is down. Or we think of sticking to the AI example, where people have such big expectations of what AI will eventually get to, and that's kind of being put on a pedestal. And of course, there are researchers and writers like the people who wrote the AI Con book who chip away at that idea and say, wait, you're aiming too high. But nevertheless, AI is on this pedestal of, even if it said we haven't gotten there yet, there's an expectation that it will get there and it will be able to do this. And oh, we're going to have a utopia. It's going to solve everything. It's going to fix plastic waste and cure cancer, and we'll be better off as a result. Is that also part of the sainthood, where even if we accept that there is a trade-off, humans are giving something to the machine and the machine is supposed to be subservient to us, at least for now, until it becomes more intelligent. But does the fact that, I guess you could say, humans have peaked and the AI still has a long way to go, help elevate it to that level of sainthood, where even what we have given becomes negligible in relation to what it supposedly will give to us? Millie, I see your hand is up again. Go for it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, just in relation to what Eva was saying about this omnipresent, ever available sex bot, I think what I'm also thinking a bit about is the way that we talk a lot about the fear of especially young people interacting with chatbots and being very dominating, very abusive in their language, but that I find it very interesting in the reverse way of like becoming the sex bot yourself, in this way that you also see teenagers doing horrible things to themselves or others because their chatbot told them so. And this idea of like, even if the chatbot doesn't have a desire, we still sort of somehow become like the sex bot of their desire, or the ones that carry it out. And in relation to this ordinary psychosis, how this voice that doesn't have any source sort of becomes the omnipresent voice that we have to follow. So in having this object that we can dominate, we end up getting dominated by it, was sort of what I don't know if that's making any sense.
Didn't Lacan say desire is always a desire of the other? Maybe that relates.
Interestingly, I think that as far as the models manipulating the humans, well, first of all, there's the saying that if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And so much of AI, especially when it was first released, was free. And even now, I mean, you can find free versions of ChatGPT, Gemini, all of them, because they want you to use it. And the more that you interact with the model is the more that the model learns through that human interaction. And in turn we are changed. We become changed by that interaction. But even outside of models that we can access, because let's say, the birth and dawn of ChatGPT and Jasper and other models like that was the first time that we could actually talk to uh, advanced AI, um, but algorithms have been controlling our lives for a long time. They decide what we watch, they decide what we see on social media, they decide if 20 years from now, Eva will be recommended on whatever social media is popular to say, you may know Eva from so and so who went to school at the same time that you did. So it even curates the persons that are within your circles or who you get to see. It decides whether I found GCAS when I put PhD researcher into a search engine. So it does dictate so much of our lives, even without us having like a anthropomorphic version of it that we can interact with. It's still working under the current, affecting us in so many ways.
Yeah, that reminded me also of the concept of labor, where the free labor is disguised as play in various digital contexts. Learning
Yes.
the boundaries. Yeah.
This is an excellent word, and I'm very happy to know it.
Yeah. So it's a hybrid, often exploitative practice where leisure, gaming, or social media activities generate economic value for companies, blurring the line between work and play. So it would be like user-generated content, like even what we do now, ultimately we'll upload this on YouTube and make YouTube some money in some way, or uploading clips, on other social media platforms. Fueling the algorithm, and can we avoid it? I think, like, to what extent choosing to avoid it, it's like you almost cease to be able to participate in reality, in shared reality.
I think there's a positive way of looking at it, and that is that we are influencing the algorithm in a way as well. It has to parse all the information in this video. It'll create a transcript. It will read it and decide who to recommend it to. So, I mean, at the end of the day, the algorithms are looking at all the data that they have and coming up with patterns and then recommending things as a result, whether it's a string of text or a video that you should watch. And I guess we're still that bit of human content that's still there and nudging that large data pool, at least in a certain direction.
So don't get me started, because the very last thing I'm going to say is that I thought about this a lot and concluded that we should be fake online, and that like the entire drive of expressing yourself and authenticity is essentially a scam to extract like from you in terms of real data, right? And so the way to resist, and like also resist from being copied by deepfakes, for example, I thought about it in context of deepfakes, is to be intentionally fake on some level and to become faker than a deepfake, was my conclusion. I will end with that.
That is actually a very, very interesting concept. I can't say I disagree with you. I have to think about it a little bit more, but I can't say at present that I disagree.
Is that the position of the saint? I just had a note about this somewhere about kind of being silent and being, what was it? Something like that. Where you just kind of withdraw and confuse through this kind of, being more enigmatic rather than giving it all away. And so confuse the algorithm somehow by your unstable presence.
Data poisoning.
Yeah.
It's subtle, but it is data poisoning in a sense. I'm sure Maria has her thoughts and feelings on me
I love
using
that.
that word.
No, strongly pro.
It's strongly pro. Okay, good thoughts and feelings on me using that word because yeah, the AI models are collecting a lot of data about us, and if the data it's collecting is not authentic, then yes, we're poisoning the model in the sense of it's now getting a very skewed understanding of humans. But I would
You
also
may
argue that
also be poisoning. Yeah, you
what
may
was
also be poisoning your interaction with the other humans, though.
that's true, but I was also going to say that there is already so much fake stuff online that AI probably already has a very skewed understanding of what it means to be human, thanks to influencers and not being able to understand sarcasm or know whether a skit is real. And even deep fakes can poison AI models because they don't know either whether or not the content they are viewing is real.
Yeah, we can expect when we see something AI generated, like that's fake, but at the same time, on human participants, there is this pressure of authenticity that is being imposed on us. So I'm saying, why are we held to that standard?
Data extraction, just like you said.
Yeah, exactly. And so, let's lean into the structural void, lean into the inconsistency, and muddle the waters a bit. Have some fun doing that. That's
Now we
where
know where the resist came from in the name for book club. This is the resistance. Muddy the water by confusing the AI about what it means to be human. I don't disagree. Well, I think we've covered the book, and oh my goodness, we're like way over time. But if anyone has other questions or comments, we'd be happy to address them before we go. Otherwise, I think this wraps up a fun book club session talking about the psychoanalysis of AI by Isabel Millar. I am so proud of us for surviving a topic that the panelists are not particularly experts on. Thank you so
we
much.
hope to survive, and yet we thrived yet again.
Yes, that is true. We thrived, not just survived. But thank you everyone for coming. It was a pleasure to have you guys. I know most people end up just watching these videos after we upload them, but it is really great when people not just join but also ask questions and interact because you never know where the conversation might go. So we appreciate that. And we hope to see you next time. Bye.
Bye.